everybody. Welcome to Retro Gamer Ranting. This is episode 3. I am your host, Twitch. Retro Gamer Ranting, episode 3. Did I get here willingly? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. But I'm here now, and I'm here to stay. Mega Man in the background there. Isn't that pretty sweet? I love myself some Mega Man. I must have played every version of Mega Man when it came out on the NES. It seemed like there was a new Mega Man game every month back in the good old 90s there with the NES, or late 80s, early 90s kind of stuff. It just was nuts. I think it got a little convoluted there towards the end. My favorite is still Mega Man 2, because I think that was like the only Mega Man game I've ever beaten. So yeah, Mega Man 2, best Mega Man game ever, maybe. I haven't played Mega Man 9 or 10 yet. The new versions was kind of the retro thing. I haven't downloaded them off WiiWare or anything yet. I'm gonna someday, and I'll probably do a review or something then. But all of them, almost all of them, are on WiiWare now. So if you haven't ever played any of the classic Mega Man games, go ahead and do it. And I'm pretty darn sure if you're listening to this, then you're probably have played Mega Man, the classic ones, of course. They're sinfully hard, at least towards the end. Once you get through the main batch of robots, that's when things get really hard. Not quite as Ninja Gaiden hard or Ghouls and Ghosts hard, but it is beatable. It's just, like I said, most NES games were hard, but Mega Man, awesome. Like I said before, this is episode 3, Retro Gamer Ranting. I'm gonna keep doing this, and people tell me to stop. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just gonna keep doing this because I'm doing this for me, because I enjoy talking to you about the wonders of the gaming world and how I think about it. I will force my opinion down your throat. Okay, I won't force it down your throat, but hey, if you choose to listen to this, then at least you might get it. Maybe I might stem some conversation. Who knows? Last time I mentioned that I was going to do something about Retro Resurgence, which I'd have to say it was not necessarily my idea. Let's see if I can say this right. Hirogi007 from my IGN actually gave me the idea for it. He was like the first person to comment on my first voice blog. Sorry, I'm being a little fidgety today for some reason. And he talked about the Retro Resurgence. And, I have a long list of things I want to blog about and talk about and that kind of stuff. But you know what? That just seemed like a very fitting subject. And I honestly am ashamed that I didn't make something like that a sooner podcast. This is probably going to be a two-parter because I can get kind of long-winded with these kind of things. Maybe a two-parter, maybe three-parter. No, I'm going to try keeping it down to a two-parter. That should be about a half hour of anything. So I apologize right now that I'm going to get a bit long-winded about this. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Like I said, I kind of go into these with just a couple of notes, and that's about it. So I don't know how long I'm going to talk for. And I did notice with my last voice cast, the closer I got to the 15-minute mark, the faster I started talking. So, quite honestly, I don't really like having a time schedule, so I figure since this is something I'm a little bit more passionate about, I'm not going to try rushing myself to the end when I get to a 12-minute mark and be like, oh Lord, I have to wrap it up. It kind of makes for a bad end to the show. But, so, hey, but Hirogi007, you're awesome. MyIGN.com, check him out. He has a cool blog, cool stuff, He's the one who gave me this idea. I'm ashamed that I didn't come up with this first. He's pretty awesome. He's one of my peeps when it comes to classic gaming. Among many other people on there, that's too many to name right now. Maybe someday I'll make a list of how many really cool people I like reading and communicating with on my IGN or any other places like GameTrailers.com or wherever else I frequent. But yeah, the Retro Resurgence, basically what kind of happened was, I think what kind of started it is one of the things where around the PS2 era and PlayStation era, the whole idea of, and it still is around, I suppose, instead of sort of bringing back these games in all its glory, it sort of turned into remaking these games and ruining them. Anyone who's played remakes or will have to say, of course, that there's a lot of very disappointed classic gamers who have played, you name it. It just seems, when it comes to retro gaming, as long as you stay to its roots, people are happy. It wasn't until, and it was still around, and there was always compilation packs out there for like your N64 and your PS2 and stuff, your Namco and Midway and that. But the real retro resurgence, I don't think, really didn't start coming until the Game Boy Advance, which I still own my Game Boy Advance, and I simply love it. What the Game Boy Advance basically was was the equivalent of a souped-up Super Nintendo in your pocket. That's what it was, graphically. And so, because of that, a lot of those older games that came out on the Super Nintendo, at least, sort of found their way back on the GBA. So that was kind of nice. All the old Mario games got re-released with some newer graphics, some sounds, whatever, you name it. Probably one of the best versions of Super Mario Brothers 2 is on the Game Boy Advance, because it felt more like Mario, unlike a lot of people felt that Super Mario Brothers 2 on the NES or even the compilation Super Mario All-Stars didn't really feel as much like a Mario game because of how different it was, but they sort of made that feel even more like Mario. And of course, I owned a Super Mario World one, which is my favorite version of it, I think. And so probably some of the best versions of those Mario games are on the Game Boy Advance. If you don't have a Super Mario All-Stars, try to peg yourself a Game Boy Advance version of these games. If you don't own a Game Boy Advance, then you should, because it's awesome. One of the things that I ended up getting was a Game Boy Advance player for my GameCube, so I could actually play these games on my television, which is the best thing on earth, because the later in life I found myself, I wasn't traveling as much as I used to. I got the Game Boy Advance because I had a job where I had to take care of someone, and so there was a lot of downtime, and I was able to play my Game Boy Advance while I was waiting for certain stuff, and sort of when that passed by, and I wasn't doing that anymore, I really wasn't taking my Game Boy Advance anywhere, but there were still awesome games on it, and so instead of always having to look down and kink my neck, it was brilliant getting that Game Boy Advance player. But I digress. So, if anything, if you have a GameCube and you don't have a Game Boy Advance, try to find it somewhere. Try to find the Game Boy Advance player, either on eBay or Amazon. I don't even know if it's on Amazon or something. Try to find that. It's an awesome little attachment. It makes it so you can play Game Boy and Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games all on your television. And that's awesome. You can't really do that with like the Nintendo DS, obviously, because the whole touchscreen thing. So that was sort of a really cool way of being able to make those little small screen elements pop up on the big screen. So try and find it, especially if you own a GameCube, obviously, because you need the GameCube to do it. But again, I digress. So that was really when the retro resurgence sort of started coming back, as you started seeing all these games coming back, from Mario to even the classic series, everything from Kid Icarus to Metroid to the Ice Climbers to classic Mario. Those were all being re-released on the Nintendo. It's not like nowadays where you kind of just download these games on your virtual console. You had to still buy them. Then if the only way you'd be able to play them is if you bought them. The physical product, that is. And of course, for those people who didn't have the classic NES or anything like that, and didn't have the time to go hunting for these games, or the console for that matter, this was actually a really brilliant thing, because it kind of started introducing newer generations to these classic games. So while it was great to see these Super Nintendo games finding a rebirth on the Game Boy Advance, it was even better to see some of these old Nintendo titles finding a rebirth on the Game Boy Advance. And so newer generations would get to see what that was like. I grew up through Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, and I mentioned in my last podcast about my cousin. He sort of missed the whole 16-bit era, and he owned a Game Boy Advance, and he really enjoyed sort of these kind of games that he sort of never got to play, he never got to experience, because he grew up when things were with the PlayStation and PlayStation 2, and so there were some 2D games on there, but it was sort of switching focus to a totally 3D world. Everything had to be 3D, three-dimensional. There wasn't a flat space anymore. It was almost like the whole 16-bit era, 2D era kind of stuff was, it wasn't cool anymore. It was flat, it was boring, no one really wanted to play that. And so that's kind of how it started. And it was kind of fun being able to see my generations of people who missed sort of that arc, kind of diving back into that again with these reimagined, not necessarily reimagined, re-released games, because they really didn't do much. They didn't really do anything to the NES classics. They kind of touched up a lot of the old Super Nintendo classics, like Final Fight, and of course the Sonic games. Some of the best Sonic games, people say, were on the Game Boy Advance, believe it or not, and it wasn't until recently with them coming out with Sonic 4 that they finally are getting back to their 2D roots, a lot of people feel. And so that was kind of the start of it, I think. And then, of course, the world of taking your console online sort of made a whole new experience, especially when it comes to the virtual console, or on the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live. You get the ability to download all these classic games for a fee, of course, and play them that way. And so that's sort of what kind of led into that. It's just the whole idea of, well, this went over well, let's do it some more. And it again, not only does it reintroduce people to people who've forgotten these classics, but it also introduces it to generations of people who missed just certain eras, even if they missed the 8-bit era or the 16-bit era, and they're even going so far as when people missed on the N64 and the PlayStation, and the Dreamcast and the Sega Saturn, And while I'll admit, like, the whole the virtual console isn't perfect, obviously. It doesn't have all the great games that people have missed. I'm kind of only speaking from a Wii standpoint, because I haven't really seen what Xbox and the PlayStation networks have to offer. They probably have a little bit more to offer in some senses than the Wii does, and vice versa. But it's the whole idea of the fact that these are finally out there again, and while it's still not to the point where you have an unlimited choices of being able to download any classic game you want. It's still whatever they want you to download. It's still great to see them there, and I think I have just as many virtual console titles on my Wii as I do physical copies of stuff. I mean, what I kind of like is the fact that if I could honestly buy a Wii, and people could just hook their Wii up to their Wi-Fi, and they could just never have to buy another physical game again, and just download all these, virtual console titles and still have a blast. There are games I've downloaded, like Rise Star. I never played that game, and it was highly recommended. It was one of those underdog games made by Sega, and I never heard of it. I played it, and it was excellent, and I honestly wish Sega would bring him back. Heck, even as a cameo to Sonic, it'd be nice. Not that Sonic doesn't have enough supporting characters right now.